I want to welcome everybody to our February DEI committee meeting. Uh, to, this month, in reference to Black History Month, we're going to have a webinar entitled Drawing the Line, How Redlining Shape Inequality During Our Time. And our presenter is Ramona Brown Carter. I'm going to give a little introduction on her, if you don't mind.
All right.
Ramona Brown Carter is a proactive and results oriented trailblazer in the field of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Her journey unfolds within a vibrant landscape of local government where she champions DEI with a focus on human relations. With over 16 years of home expertise in project management and strategic planning, Ramona embodies resourcefulness and drive, leaving an indelible mark wherever she goes. Today, I present to you Ramona Brown Carter.
Are you sure you're talking about me? That I was so surprised. No, thank you so much. I appreciate you introducing me. Good afternoon, everyone. If you'd be so kind, we have some emojis down at the bottom. Just begin to show me how you're feeling today. If you're having a good day or a bad day, if you're anticipating this, go ahead and throw up some hearts, throw up some likes, throw up some yes. Candace, I see has a celebration going on. Thank you so much. Quadrillion, did I say that right?
Quadrillion.
Thank you so much. Listen, we are going to be together for a little while, not a long time, as one of my coworkers say. I don't want to make you happy twice. I don't want to make you happy to see me get on this screen and also happy to see me in my presentation and get off this screen. Really quickly, I am an education and outreach associate for the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights. All those wonderful things certainly do impact my life on a day-to-day basis, but I'm just like anyone else. I'm a mom, I'm a wife. After work, I have to go and run and do this and run and do that. And so every now and again, I get to have an opportunity where I get to do things that I like. And this is actually something that I actually like to do. So I need two things from you. I need your participation. That means that if you can and you have the ability to turn your cameras on, please turn your cameras on, because it helps me to know that I'm not just talking to myself. Those of you who have your cameras on, thank you so much. I appreciate it. If you can't or you don't want to, that's not a problem. The second thing that I need from you is your participation. Now, that could be two. It could be vocally. I prefer that, vocally, or it can be within the chat. However, we do need to communicate with each other because we try to develop our trainings to be interactive trainings. And in order for me to give you my energy, I need that energy back from you. So we are talking today about the red line. We're going to go through some different phases. And we'll get into that. And I'm just trying to get to sharing. Please let me know if you see my screen. And then I am going to hide, hold on, the floating controls. But now I have lost everyone. Let's see if I can get you back. There we go. And I got you back. So can everyone see my screen still?
Yes.
Awesome, great. So we're reviewing the red line and the analysis of barriers in fair housing. Of course, I had already introduced myself as an education and outreach associate for the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights. And this is our mission and our vision. And simply says the mission of the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights is to ensure equal opportunity to all through the enforcement of Maryland's laws against discrimination in employment, public accommodation, housing, healthcare provision, commercial non-discrimination, to provide education and outreach services related to provisions in these laws, and to promote and improve civil and human rights in Maryland. That was a lot. Basically, our vision is to make sure that this state is free from discrimination, and especially unlawful discrimination. So what does that mean, and how do we do that? We simply utilize the laws that are given to us to invoke our powers. And these are the laws that are listed here. They are at your ready fingertips. You can go to our website and MCCR maryland.gov, and you will find that information there, as well as the federal. And we'll get into the laws a little bit. However, our enforcement powers come under the guise of employment, housing, public accommodations, healthcare provision, as well as state contracts. Now, today, we're definitely going to take not a very deep dive, but we're certainly going to skim a good amount of the surface of what redlining looks like. So we'll review the history of redlining. We'll talk about defining fair housing, the impact of redlining. We'll talk about fair housing and civil rights laws. We'll talk about the aftermath of the aftermath of redlining. And then we'll also talk about the future of home ownership. And I do know that everyone here is fully aware of the process of home ownership. So if some of this sounds redundant, it is because we often want to make sure that everybody gets the same information. So, see what happened here. It didn't change. Okay, there we go. So now, the other thing that we also stress the importance of is managing stress during training. Often there are words that trigger when you hear certain things. You may get angry. You may have not even realized that you hadn't dealt with something in a long time. So if you are feeling overwhelmed, if you want to take a break, if you need to walk away, I am not going to be like, oh, where did so-and-so go? Because I really don't know you like that. And if you had to take a call, I wouldn't know. But we do stress the importance of you taking time for you. We express that we want to hear from you, but also if you need to speak with me afterwards, if you need clarity on something, I'll put my email in the chat and you can certainly send me an email. Or if you like for me to stay around afterwards, I'll wait until we close out the room. And then after that, that's that. So Matthew Desmond says, housing is absolutely essential to human flourishing. Without stable shelter, it all falls apart. And how many of you know that that resonates in all of our communities now? Simply, you can see those who are homeless, who are impacted by cold weather right now, where their shelters are full, they're open in cold weather centers, and they're still not enough adequate housing for everyone. But having a home is certainly essential for everyone. And so we are working as a civil and human rights community to make sure that that is available to everyone. So here is simply a guide to a renter's approach. Seems as though it's a very simple approach. You see it, you fill out the application, this says that it takes about 3 hours, but how many of us know if you are a renter or if you have rented before, it kind of takes a little bit longer. But these are just some regular guidelines as far as renting. Now, what in 2025? Sometimes you don't even have to talk to anyone. Sometimes you can just do everything online. And the pandemic showed us that proof is in that method. But then when we think about the pathway to home ownership, it is not that simple. It is not just 1, 2, 3. I can go to the bank and I can ask for a loan, or I have the actual financial resources to make that available to me. It is a very daunting process. Sometimes there's those who will start the process and get midway of the process and get frustrated and say, maybe this is not for me right now, and quit. Or you will have someone who will pull someone away from buying a house, like, you have to do this and you have to do that. And it's a part of life. When you have a car, you have to get it fixed. So when you have a home, you have to get it fixed. And so we have to make sure that when we are thinking about those who are becoming first-time home buyers, those who have owned a home with a partner and now they're divorced, or they are now widowed, and now they have to find themselves relocating and buying a home again and starting this process all over, that we are making these processes as easy as possible. And that is good for when? Now, in 2025, we certainly have programs that are available to help people walk from beginning to the end. And as realtors, or as people who work in the bank, or as people who are working in these organizations that help individuals get it, we understand our parts now. And where? 2025. But when we think about redlining and how it impacted a community back in the 1930s, right? So we're going all the way back into the 1930s and even beyond then, because housing was not always accessible to everyone. I'm going to post a question. Does anybody know what the definition of redlining is? And if you would you please unmute yourself, because I have lost the chat screen.
I believe, hello,
Hi, Erin. Thank you.
redlining was mostly performed by lenders and wouldn't loan in certain areas based on many, many reasons that we're talking about today.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Would anybody else like to add to the conversation on today? Excuse me, Erin, you were correct. It is a general red line. It was a systematic denial of various services or goods by the government or the private sector, either directly or by selectively raising prices, by making it unattainable for certain people. It referred most commonly to property values and home ownership. Now that is a frilly definition, right? That's a good definition. But when we think about the actual harsh definition when it comes to urban communities, it was a discriminatory practice as far as federal housing policies were concerned. And back when we think about the construct of America, it really was it really impacted not only Black people, but it impacted people of color, certainly those of marginalized communities. And also it impacted those who were coming across the water at certain times, and it could involve Italians, it can involve Irish people. And so it certainly had its non-limitations to how far the discriminatory practices would go. This practice was widespread. It was not just centralized. However, we do know that Baltimore kind of created the landscape of what it would look like for redlining. So in the 1930s, the Homeowners Loan Corporation was established by President Franklin D. Roosevelt, which was a part of the New Deal, which allocated homes based and mortgages based off of neighborhoods, right? What they considered would be good land, what could be considered accessible land. Risky or hazardous, that's where the red ink would come in on a map. And that's where they begin to kind of mark what is redlining. And so those risky or hazardous places were the urban communities where they were trying to move those of certain of stature or of affluence in the community into what they consider now better neighborhoods. And so the purpose and the intent was to guide mortgage lenders away from providing loans and giving funds to people and that they deemed as though we're not deserving of it. And that is my terms. And we know that during those times there were definitely harsher terms that were utilized. Not only was there a purpose, but the Federal Housing Administration had a major influence on how this looked, the underwriting of the loans, what it looked like to live in prominent neighborhoods, what it looked like to have the upper hand to get these and to make certain neighborhoods so unattainable that it seemed like it was never in your reach. So let's take a look at this. This is one of the marble homes way back in the Roland Park neighborhood when it was first established. And it was the beginning of what started the red line communities. And it trickled down to what is now known as Hellthorpe. It trickled down up into what is known as Towson, Maryland. It trickled, well, not down, but trickled upwards, right? And you say, well, what do you mean by trickle? Because they began to develop what is now considered Baltimore City and what began to become Baltimore County. And that is how we got the red line, right? That is how, and then you say, well, how did they know or what happened? And so the innovative way was, oh, excuse me, it took me back. The innovative way was to utilize streetcars, right? Because really wasn't that much transportation or many people who were accessible to transportation. So when you think about it, they utilized those streetcars because who would take streetcars in the evening to go home? It would be those of those upper crust people. Because if you were on there, that meant that you were heading to work. So you were heading to work for a person who lived in those neighborhoods. There really wouldn't be a reason for a person of color to be on these streetcars after a certain time heading into those neighborhoods, other than you were starting trouble or you wanted, or you were doing something, or you were working. So either you were getting ready to do something or you were working. And you can see even in Towson now, if you go to Towson and on Taylor Avenue, there is some remnants of the streetcars in that area. So even though they try to pave up after a while with the beating down of the the car show, you still see the constructs of the streetcars in those particular areas. But how do you one of the things that I want to pinpoint here is that now when we look at Towson, and now when you look at certain neighborhoods that surround Baltimore City, even in the various counties, you will see that if you have the money to live in those neighborhoods, whether you are a renter or a homeowner, there is no limit to what you have accessibility to. And why is there no limit to it? Because there is now equity. And equity is the ownership of the asset for a business or the homeowner, right? It is calculated by liabilities and assets. So if I'm a renter and I want to live in a certain neighborhood, as long as I have the money and I can prove that I can pay that money monthly, I can live in those areas. And so that gives those people equity and ownership. There's also those who are stockholders, private equity, home, and though homeowners with home equity. And when you think about that, equity, we think about equity as a pay source, right? We think about what can I do to develop what I have to make more. But equity is more than that. When we're thinking about fair housing, when we're thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, there is more than just what the assets look like. Before we get into the equity in DEI, I want to just kind of pinpoint the Great Depression and want you to understand that the reason for the rapid development of housing was because there was a shortage of housing. And there you can see certainly with Bethlehem still over in the Dundalk area, they began to build homes in that particular area. And even in the separation between the two. So Bethlehem still, homes, Dundalk. For Black people, Turner Station. And if you think about Turner Station now, Turner Station is still kind of set up the same way. It's one way in and one way out. It is still unequal value in that particular area to some. Now, some who have grown up in the area, they value that area. They understand the importance of community. They understand, sometimes we will clash with those who are on the other side of the street, but they value their area. And so the National Housing Act of 1934 certainly created a conundrum as far as the New Deal and housing is concerned, as far as making home ownership more unaccessible. I won't say accessible, but unaccessible to those whom they did not want to have home loans at that particular time. So we're going to talk about DEI and what equality versus equity looks like. And before we get started, is there one place that you can think of where there's room for everyone? Before we get started here, is there like somewhere where you've gone and you notice that there is accessibility for everyone, and it can be anywhere that you've encountered recently, or if you think about in the past? And if you don't mind just unmuting yourselves for me.
Do you mean anywhere, like even outside of Maryland?
Yep,
I would say an airport.
an airport. That's a good place. Anywhere else?
Any public park or museum.
Public parks.
Yeah.
Yes, they are now making
Government, public.
exact. Thank you so much. And is that Shazine? Did I say that correct? Oh, good.
Spot on. Yes,
Shazine.
thank you.
Good. And so what I want to tell you is that when you go to sporting events, no matter how big that stadium is, there is always room for those who need accessibility, right? So now I need you to put your mind in that we're getting ready to go into Oriole Park, okay? Put your mind where Oriole. Is everybody familiar with the Orioles? Now I'm from New Haven, so I know if I know about Oriole Park. Everyone here should know about Oriole Park, right? Okay, good. So listen, equality is what? Treating everyone the same when we think about equality. So let's go into Oriole Park, and we've been invited to a baseball game. This baseball game simply says that everybody gets to see the game who couldn't make it into the park, but they were able to get to the fence. And they say, okay, if you can look at the game on the fence, we're not going to bother you, right? So equality says that, oh, well, you may need something to see over the fence, and we'll give you some boxes. Equity says we provide the resources that you need in order for you to have the same accessibility. So what does that mean? That person who was short may need just a little bit of a lift in order to see over the fence, because they weren't able to still see if we see these other people. Now, both equality and equity seems to be the same. Equality, fair treatment of all. Equity, giving somebody the resources, we're still treating them the same. It is, but not oftentimes the correct thing. And why is that? Because reality says that there's always going to be someone who gets more than the other. That is just reality. You can't shake it. You may have had a hand up or a hand down. You may have an inheritance. Someone may have worked very hard in order to get to where they are. But there's always going to be someone who has more than others. And then you're also going to bump into the person who said, well, I got here first. And so I gathered everything that I wanted, and whatever is left for everyone else, you can have that, but I have all of this. And that is how we create systematic barriers within our community. But when we operate in liberation, we simply remove the barrier. And what happens if we remove the fence? If we remove what was the thing from the beginning that stopped everyone from seeing the game, then we understand that that was the problem from the beginning. And the resources are still there for people to have. However, what our problem was is inviting someone to the game. And is it really necessary for this particular fence to be there? Or can we create a better fence? If we need the fence there because, let's say, players run and you don't want them to run outside the park, or something happens and you don't want something, you're avoiding a catastrophe. We get it. But if this is something that we can remove, there's a systematic barrier that we can remove, then this is how we create liberation. And redlining was certainly not about liberating individuals at all. And so we're going to talk about defining what unfair unfair housing basic definition, discrimination, the refusing to rent or sell to someone of other race, religion, disability, or protected class. This means even using tactics like threatening or actually evicting someone because they have a disability, because of their religion, or because they are from a protected class, or they have a protected characteristic. Public housing was the new term that was used to try and fix what redlining was. However, it started off as jobs first, right? So I had mentioned earlier that Dundalk, the separation for Bethlehem still between Dundalk and Turner Station, right? And it was like, okay, we're gonna clear up these areas and we're gonna make accessible housing. But really, it just kind of turned into public house, what was referred to as the housing projects. It really didn't really go anywhere because once people got in there, it was very hard for them to get out of. Suburbanation, the process of moving people from cities into the suburbs. And it also refers to building things in certain areas so that people would come into those areas. Steering, directing someone from a neighborhood based on the assumption about their preference, what we think that someone would prefer, or how we think they would prefer to reside in a neighborhood. Would they be more comfortable in a neighborhood that people look like them, or the assumption that somebody is of the LGBTQ community, would they function better in a community that's more accepting? We cannot steer or guide anyone. But then there's this now, the opposite of redlining, and that is gentrification, right? Where now we're starting to move back into the city, into these urban community areas, and the prices of these areas are now pricing out those who were there before. So if you don't even own your home, you're going to get priced out. If you don't even own your home, they're going to offer you enough money to make you leave, and then have the ability to make more money on top of that. And we're not here for that, so we're not going to talk about that. But these are the effects of redlining. So let's think about some descriptive language that could have possibly been used to steer or to promote discrimination. Ethnic references like Black, Caucasian, white, Asian, or American Indian. Nationality using Chinese, African, German, or Italian. This German neighborhood or this neighborhood fancies to what have you, right? Religious references like near a temple or a mosque, Christian or Muslim or Catholic church, utilizing this to kind of steer people into the right way, right? Gender, sex, gender, or sexual orientation, like is male, female, transgender. We're looking for, we want, or although it might seem accepted, it certainly can be discriminatory. And is there ever a time when it is appropriate to utilize these in a viewing? Anyone? Is there? And our response would be there. And I don't know if someone is able to see the chat. Unfortunately, I am not able to see the chat anymore. I can see you, but I'm not able to see the chat. And I'm not sure if anyone is utilizing the chat, but if someone is utilizing the chat, if you could let me know. If not, we'll continue. The response is no. What we've added here is describe the property and what, not the people. We want to make sure that we are utilizing terms that make everyone feel safe and comfortable. So, what are some acceptable phrases to use to persuade a buyer to a new or aged community? What are some acceptable phrases to utilize? And you all are the experts here in this particular area. So, what are some phrases that we could utilize? Anyone?
I'm not 100% sure of the question.
So I was just talking about some of the phrases that we should not use when we're trying to bring someone to an area. So what are some acceptable phrases that we can use in order to welcome someone into, or to persuade buyers or renters into a new or an aged community?
Oh, like welcome to this historic neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. Very good. That's great. And then you can describe all the wonderful things about the neighborhood. You can talk about the schools. You can talk about the stores near Starbucks, near this, near that, near this. These are all terms that are welcoming in. But when you begin to pinpoint the or utilize code terms to kind of make people feel as though you're only looking for a specific group of people, that is when we begin to see where redlining has its impacts even now into today. So we're going to move on into the impacts of redlining. Redlining came with systemic discrimination. It came with impact on housing opportunities, the exacerbation of segregation, economic disparities. It also came with health and social consequences, because a lot of times, and we see that now, that even just coming outside of what people look for as far as health institutions, where you may have to travel 30, I want to say 30 miles to the nearest hospital, where there are some communities that have a local hospital that is not far, or they have access to a doctor, or they have access to an urgent care. You don't have to go too far to get to the things that they need. And so there are consequences when we begin to develop outside of making a comfortable space for others. We talked about this a little bit earlier, the FHA and suburbanation. And I want to kind of give you a guideline of what it looked like from 1935 to 1974. 3/4 of the mortgages from the FHA had its limits on where they would support getting loans or giving loans to. They favored restrictive zoning areas, and they also had strict racial segregation. In many areas, like public housing projects were also used to be segregated by. And so we kind of talked about these things already, but it is a refresher to understand that when these things come into a place, they create a racial wealth gap. We are not able to fully function in our ability to have an assets, or to have a legacy that was handed down from home to home, or someone to give me a doll when I get married, and know that I can use that to put that as a down payment on a home or something of that nature. These create problems for those who are in the Black and minority communities. Even now, it has its impacts now. Limited home ownership opportunities, restrictions to access to credit. Some people just feel like if I pay money out, I'm good. And if I pay money out, I'm good. And they don't even think about, well, I don't want a credit card. But then there's this, you have to have a credit card in order to get the things that you want. But then when you use the credit card, you use it too much, you still don't have the access to what you need. And so this is how racial wealth gaps are how they impact the community. Not only that, but it creates accumulation disparities, integration, and it has a generational impact on the community. So each generation sometimes don't foresee themselves doing better. Sometimes, not all times, but they don't see themselves doing better because the generation before them had no ambition of moving, or even because of the way life has battered them down. Creates disparate impact. Policies that seem to be neutral on the face, however, is disproportionate on the inside and has a negative impact. and for an example, a landlord cannot have a policy that will only accept income from work because it has a disparate impact on those with disabilities or those who receive funds like child support. And we'll talk about that a little bit further, but we have to keep in mind that especially in the state of Maryland, we now have to take into account that there are other things that lend towards us having more access to financial assets. So let's touch home base again, and this is a question that I'm going to pose to you. A mortgage lender imposes a higher interest rate on a home loan for a property in a predominantly African American or Latino neighborhood versus a predominantly Caucasian neighborhood, or offers a loan with unfavorable terms to the borrower based on their sex or race. Is this acceptable?
No.
Oh, no.
It
That's an
is.
easy one.
I'm sorry, say that again.
I said, that's an easy one. Of course not.
Of course
No.
not. It's not acceptable. And so is this an impact from redlining?
Yes.
Yes, it does. It does. And in what ways can you see today that it still has its impact from redlining? Because whereas in you say, because you are a person who understands that this is discriminatory, there are those who don't care. The reason why I'm going to say there are those who don't care, because right now, if you type on the HUD website and you look for something concerning fair housing, you're not going to see it. If you look for something that tells you what is the right thing for me to do, am I operating right? Will I get sued for this? On a federal level, there is no remnants of, yes, there may be some archived PDFs, but right now we're in a time where it's up in the air what we can and cannot do. However, on the state level, and we'll get into that, on the state level, there are protections. And that is in our next, and what time? I'm sorry, I didn't even ask. When are we finished? What time are we done?
3 o'clock.
3 o'clock. Okay,
Mhm.
so I'm gonna bypass the break. I'm glad you said that, and we're gonna talk about fair housing laws. And I just talked about the Federal Housing Administration and the New Deal National Act of 1934. Then there was the Veterans Administration that helped those who came home get housing. Not everybody, but it helped those
Mhm.
who came home and gave them housing and gave them money. Certain veterans, not all. And that is proven even now today. Racially restricted housing covenants grew in the 1930s and 1940s, and that excluded African Americans from the process as well. And then the Supreme Court declared unconstitutional Shelley versus Kramer. And we're not going to dive into that because that will certainly take us a while. But I just kind of want you to see the social construct of building into fair housing. So now we move into 1968, where Lyndon B. Johnson passes the Fair Housing Act. And then it really quickly, I want to throw a bonus question out there. Does anyone know the civil rights activist who had died not too long, or who was assassinated not too long before the signing of this particular part of the act? Because it was not a part of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. But I'm sure that this assassination motivated this particular signing.
Dr. King?
Correct. Dr. King had not too long before he signed this into place, had not too long been assassinated. So it prohibits discrimination in race, color, gender, religion, national origin, and family status. Those who are pregnant or having children under the age of 18, and also those with disabilities. This was also information or laws that were put in place in the Civil Rights Act of 1866. However, when that was, and no one really, when they freed slaves, they really didn't know how to give them housing. They really didn't know what to do. They didn't really know but they just knew that this was an emancipated law. And the Supreme Court went back and said, okay, well, we have these already kind of in place. Let's figure out how to make this move a little bit better. And so now we have where we are. The state law is the law that our office operates out of. We have investigators that specifically have expertise in fair housing. Covers marital status, and we'll talk about that, but it also covers gender identity, and gender orientation as well. I mean, gender identity and sexual orientation. I have no idea why I tried to combine those two. State law also has entered in a new, right in 2020, 2021 source of income, and we'll get into that. But local jurisdictions as well have protections too. So the law of the land simply says, well, we're up in the air federally, but statewide, we understand that there are laws of protections, but there are also local laws of protection. And so if you commit fair housing discrimination in a local township or a local city or a local county, you are under their jurisdiction. Now, if that person decides that they want to escalate it to a state level, then we can certainly take that complaint from this local areas and bring it to our jurisdiction. And so these are the protected classes and that familiar status and that source of income. Okay, something happened and these flipped. I apologize. This should have been before the other one, but these are the cities and counties that have local jurisdiction. Anne Arundel County, Baltimore City, Baltimore County, City of Annapolis, which is different from Anne Arundel County. So the county itself has a Human Relations Commission, but the City of Annapolis at some point codified their own Human Relations Commission as well. City of Cumberland, Frederick County, Harford County, Howard County, Montgomery County, Prince George's County, as well as St. Mary's County. Did not hear a county mentioned, and that means that they fall under the guise of our office here at the state of Maryland, because they don't have protections. And so the person who needs to file a complaint will certainly come directly to our office. So source of income, and there's that graph again as far as the rental process is concerned. But is any legal way of earning money that is paid to a renter or buyer or of housing? This includes from employment, government assistance, or other sources. And what are those sources? Again, job occupation, it could be government or private assistance. This could be housing vouchers. This could be assistance from a loan or a grant, gifts, inheritance, pensions, alimony or child support, interest earned from an investment, dividends from stocks, profits from selling assets like real estate. And I know a young lady who I used to supervise, she came to me and she was applying for housing. And she said to me, and this was in 2023, and she said to me, Miss Ramona, she said, I own property in Massachusetts, and I tried to utilize, I tried not to utilize the property, the funds from that property as a asset for applying for this housing. I said, okay. And she said, but the rental company is saying that I need to use it, but I qualify with just my my pay, my annual pay, and or with my salary. And I said, okay. I said, well, did you tell them that you weren't interested? She said, yeah, but the property manager or the whoever the person was that was going over her financial statement said, well, what if you decide not to pay us because something happened to a property that you own? And you decided to take care of that and not pay your rent. And I said, well, they can't make that assumption for you. I said, that's kind of discriminatory. I said, I said now, and at the time I was working for Baltimore County Human Relations Commission. I said, but I said, I could contact them, but Mama Bear would probably come out, so I'm not going to contact them. I said, but I think you should contact the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights and have them look into this. And she said, do you think so? And I said, no, I know so, not think so, I know so. You need to contact them. And sure enough, she did. She had a case on her hand and she actually did win, because there is no way for you to determine what someone's going to utilize their assets for when they are utilizing a certain source. If that was not the source that was put up, then we cannot just make the assumption or even pull from that particular asset in order to gain funds from. So I just shared that just to let you know that it is still happening even now. When we think of people like, do people really turn people away for source of income? They do. They do find ways to get by. So, this is as far as exemptions, as far as the Fair Housing Act is concerned. I want you to, and you'll get a copy of this. I'll make sure that I send this slide to you so that you can utilize this if you want to. If you don't, it's certainly fine by us. Excuse me, before I go past that, dwelling units and rooms and buildings of 4 or fewer units provided by the owner of the building occupied. And if the owner lives, I kind of wanted to pinpoint that. Because sometimes those who rent or sell property, like let's say somebody owns a building and now they want to kind of rent these off as condos or apartments, or even sell them for a property or what have you. They kind of have a little bit more free will than someone who owns a larger corporation. So those who are independent owners have a little bit more free will, especially with single family homes and that are sell or for rental and is not advertised in a discriminatory manner. If it is operated by a religious organization, if they feel as though they don't want to kind of mix in or intertwine, if it's in their within their auspice, then they could certainly turn a person down. And then lodging owned by a private club as well. So commercial, and it is used for commercialized purposes. They certainly can utilize that as well. I'll skip that because we have a little bit time and we want to continue on. There are some key takeaways when we're dealing with fair housing. Understand that discrimination against home renters or buyers by landlords and sellers and lenders on account of race, color, religious, sexual orientation, disability, or family status is prohibited. This act is enforced at the federal level, and it's supposed to be. Again, this is before we entered into this new, we have no idea what we're in right now. As far as the housing and urban development is concerned, housing discrimination persists nonetheless and can be difficult to prove unless what? Someone utilizes proper documentation and have patience. Our investigators here and our mediators here are certainly trained and well poised. However, you have to have patience, and you can't expect that I am going to get my discrimination claim gone through really quickly. We want to make sure that we have the proper documentation, we are following fact finding, we are doing what is necessary in order for someone to help someone. So the aftermath after redlining. So we see what redlining did. It kind of separated the white neighborhoods from the Black neighborhoods or Caucasian neighborhoods from Latino and African American. But we knew during those times, those were definitely not the terms that were utilized at that time. But the aftermath after invoking federal and state and local laws for protection came with fair housing policies, community reinvestment, zoning and land use policies. And this was very important because it reformed what mixed income housing and reduced residential segregation. So it kind of gave credence to people being able to integrate within this. So there was full transparency as far as data is concerned. At that time, what they considered full transparency, because even now data can be manipulated in a um computer or analytical sense. It gave community empowerment, certainly community engagement. It put the power back into the communities. The communities were able to help each other. I went through this process to get my house, and so here, go to this person, and this person will help you, or we'll show you how to get, and it helped with removing those who were gatekeepers, capacity building, supporting community organization, education awareness, because you can buy a home, but you also need to know what comes with buying a home. Economic development. I'm sorry, and within economic development, investments in under served neighborhoods, small business support, job training and employment programs became readily available to those who want it better. Legal and regulatory actions, enforcement of fair housing laws, the litigation and remediation, supporting legal action. So we had to work towards figuring out what went wrong, what was the harms from it, and how do we remediate it to make sure that we never go back to that space again. Collaboration and partnerships, public and private partnerships, research and data analysts, long-term commitments, meaning policy longevity, and monitoring and evaluations were certainly key points to take place during the aftermath of redlining. The future of home ownership. Now, we know that when people ask for training like this, and I'm going to go to the next slide in just a second, but for a second, I need you to think about the communities that you serve, the clients that you have. How do I make a difference every day? Do I come to work and I just show up? Or do I come to work and I understand my purpose, and I understand that when I walk into the room, regardless to where I sit on the totem pole, those who need the resources that I have look to me as the power in the room. And as long as I am the person that can help them, I am the person who is the subject matter expert. I am the person who has more knowledge than the other person. And so we want those of us who are on this platform today, and anyone else that works with you or for you, or you work or you are, that has the heart to become a fair housing ally. And an ally is a person or a group that helps and supports another person. They evaluate existing procedures. They do what, like we're doing today, attend training, discuss regularly, publicize your commitment, and take advantage of available resources. So what that means is that we are developing interdepartmental policies that affect our community. We are making sure that we are conducting business where it is not in a discriminatory manner, because it takes one person to say one thing that has everybody on Yelp or everybody on something to give somebody a bad business review. And we must agree to provide professional services without regard to race, religion, gender, or sex or disability. We must keep informed about fair housing laws and practices, develop advertising that indicates that everyone is, and no one is excluded. We want to inform our clients when things happen. We refuse to utilize or tolerate non-compliance. We learn about those who are different from us. So that means that sometimes I have to get outside of my bubble. Sometimes I have to get outside of my community to understand others. So after all that we've kind of shared today, and we just, like I said, this was not a deep analysis of redlining, but we were just skimming the surface. What are some steps that you're willing to take in order to help your clients achieve home ownership? So what are those who feel as though they are unable to achieve it? What are some steps that you're willing to take? Anyone?
I think referring them to lenders who are going to work with them and really keep them like that, are good people that are in it with you.
Right. So you have to know who you have to know who to send them to. You just don't want to send them to a random person, because just because they help client A doesn't mean that they're willing to help client B. And then you want to share the wealth, but you want to make sure that you are not, that the wonderful experience of buying a home doesn't stop with you, right? You want to make sure. Anyone else?
Well, I'm Sarah. I'm the CEO of HCAR. Thank you so much for doing this for us today. And I think that my next step and our next step as staff here at HCAR is to make sure that we share this information with our members. So we will
Yes.
certainly do that if you will send us the PowerPoint.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I appreciate that. Thank you for having me on today. Great. These both comments are exactly what we need. And so as we're bringing it down, we're at 2:55. We want you to work to understand how patterns of oppression operate, and was willing to identify oppressive acts and challenges that oppressive behavior has over others. That was a mouthful. Work to be an ally for oppressed groups. Work towards addressing and confronting individuals without being defensive, sarcastic, or threatening. Meaning that you can say what you need to say and you don't have to put yourself in harm's way or your client in harm's way. Find ways to educate yourself or others. And you just said that, Sarah, like, and we share the knowledge and we begin to direct people in the proper way, then we have ways of making this happen. We want to advocate again for policy changes. When you see something that's not right, you need to say something. Support organizations working on fair housing issues. It is not just a them problem, it is a us problem, because we have no idea what someone can bring to our community if we don't let them in. And that goes for those who you may live in a community where someone decides that they want to rent their home. Let's not make the assumption that everybody that rents only can afford it because they have Section 8. We have to be honest about that, right? And last but not least, we want to challenge discriminatory practices when encountered. So I want to leave you with how I started. Housing is absolutely essential to human flourishing. Without stable shelter, it falls apart. Thank you so much for having me. If you have any questions, I'm here. Like I said, I will put my email and our email here at the commission, not my I'll do both. I'll put my email here. Ask for it to stop sharing into the chat. Thank you so much. We appreciate you inviting us here. If anyone has anything that they'd like to say, if not, I'll just wait around until you close out the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On behalf of the Diversity, Equity, that DEI committee, I want to thank you, Ramona. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for taking time out of your busy schedule. And we definitely want to get a copy of this presentation and make us better people. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate everyone. And we have other trainings that are available. There's other people on our team. It's not necessarily just me. There are other trainings that are available if you'd like to go on our website and take a look at them. And also we do have events that we are doing out in the community, and they're posted on our website as well. Tomorrow I'll be at the Enoch Pratt Library, a part of a panel here in Baltimore. And then we'll be back at the Enoch Pratt Library next Wednesday for a paint and award ceremony. And that should be a very fun time. So again, thank you so much, and everyone have a wonderful day.
Thank you, you too.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care.